Okay, we should be on now. So, hi everybody, and welcome to another video in the Assassins of Language Learning series, where each time we tackle a different topic that is kind of a motivation killer when it comes to language learning. Now, you don't have to be a polyglot for this to apply to you. You could be just learning your first language or well, not your first language, but first foreign language, or your third or whatever. But I'm hoping that this will help you in some kind of way. And each week I like to have kind of a special guest to interview. And this week I have somebody who is very well known in the polyglot community. But if you don't know her, I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Cool. Hi, my name is Lindie Botes. I am South African. I grew up in the Middle East and currently I'm working in South Africa. And I love language learning, and it's my mission to inspire people to discover new methods of language learning for themselves. So that's what I do. Oh, and my full-time job is a designer, nothing to do with languages.
She is very cool and very inspiring. So if you don't already know her, I'd encourage you to go check out her channel. I've got all her links below for you to see. And yeah, so we're going to jump right into this. So this week, we will be talking about comparison when it comes to learning languages. Now, it's one of those things that I feel like people don't really talk about often. At least when I started learning languages and watching YouTube videos, people didn't really say much beyond, oh, don't compare yourself to others. So I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that and kind of see your thoughts on different things that might happen in different ways we compare ourselves to other people. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, in what situations do we risk falling into the trap of comparison?
Like you said, it's not really something that's spoken about. And I think it might also be like that because people don't want to admit that they are envious or that they compare themselves to other people. I think there's a healthy dose of comparison if it serves as motivation for us. But if it gets to the point of envy or jealousy, it can be really negative and can affect your language learning journey because you'll spend more time thinking about how you want to be like that person instead of actually, working for yourself. So you're asking what situations you can find yourself comparing in? I'll speak from experience. So being a language YouTuber, back in the day, I used to compare my views and subscribers, which I think is a normal thing a lot of YouTubers do, especially if it's someone who does something similar to you. So I couldn't care less how many subscribers a beauty YouTuber has. But when it's a language learning person, I used to find myself in the situation like, well, I'm doing what they're doing what I'm doing. How did they get here? And the one way that I got over it actually was to befriend those people, because that way the comparison, sort of the envy, fades away and it becomes like you become friends with a person and you start encouraging each other. And what I think is really healthy about the polyglot community, especially the Langler community on Tumblr and Instagram, is how encouraging people are and how we motivate each other. And I think befriending people who you might be envious of really helps you get over yourself and just realize we're all actually heading towards the same goal.
I think that's wonderful advice, especially the bit about befriending those people in the first place. Because, yeah, it does kind of help you get to see them as a person and not just as, I guess, like a YouTuber or whatever kind of label that they may have.
Right. And I mean, the other situation might be completely removed from social media. It might be you're in a language classroom and there are other students doing a lot better than you and you're struggling to keep up. That would lead to comparison as well. You'd think, well, my level is not nearly as good as these people. How can I get there? So I think the thing you need to do there is take that comparison and turn it into a healthy dose of motivation, so that you look at these people and you think, okay, how are they doing this? And again, the topic of befriending them. Don't be jealous that they are on a better level, but go to them and say, could you help me with this? Or can you tell me how you manage your time? Or how did you do on last week's test? Can you show me how you studied? So really interacting with them and seeing how they do it and applying those tips.
Right, and I think that all the points you're bringing up are wonderful because all of them actually tie into future questions that I have for this kind of video. So one that you mentioned was about in the classroom as well, and my question for that was, what are some things that may cause others to compare themselves to other polyglots or to their own classmates? That's what I was going for. And you did cover that already. Sometimes you have a classmate and they may be doing better than you and you may compare yourselves to them. Because this goes beyond just what you see on YouTube. Even in the classroom, you can find situations where you may compare yourself. And then another thing. So you were saying that comparison can actually be helpful in a way. My question was, can it be helpful? And you said, in a way, if you turn it into a healthy thing, it can be. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Let me think. I don't think comparison in itself is a very healthy thing, but motivation and inspiration is. So if you are finding inspiration from these people and how they succeed at language learning, that's great. But if you are constantly comparing yourselves to them, waking up and saying, I wish I was that and that person, or I wish I could study as hard as that, then it becomes negative and you're breaking yourself down. So just learning to shift that comparison into motivation is a lot healthier. What do you think?
I think so too. And I think actually that's where, kind of depending on what language you use, it could be kind of like where it goes from admiration to comparison. Because it's one thing to appreciate somebody. Like, you can't just ignore that and be like, oh, I can't watch anybody's videos or pay attention to anybody else except myself.
Yeah.
But you can watch people's videos and admire them and say, wow, you are really good at this. And I guess find it inspiring. But it's when you start saying things like, I wish that I had that ability, or I wish I could speak as well as you, that it starts to turn into comparison.
Yeah. And I think we also have a tendency to idolize people and to see them as better than they actually are. And we need to remember that we're all humans. And part of the reason I do my Polyglot Princesses series is to just talk to these people and say, well, they have, you know, the same ups and downs as I do in language learning. We might have different strengths or different interests, but we're all just human. And I'm pretty sure if you're comparing yourself to someone else is comparing themselves to you.
That is so true.
Mm.
And I think it's so easy, especially with all of the social media around, because you don't just have YouTube, but you also have, especially like being a content creator, you're kind of forced to, if you want to like really get serious about this, have a Facebook page, have an Instagram, have Twitter, have all of that. And then you're also following other people in the same community as well. So I think it's easy to just go on your newsfeed one day and kind of see like, wow, everyone's really progressing, and like, what am I doing? Am I doing enough?
Yeah. You said something earlier that got me thinking. Did you say it depends on the language? Like, do you think it would differ from language to language?
I think by that, I mean the kind of language you're using. So not particularly the language you study, but the kind of words that come out of your mouth.
Right, like self-talk. Absolutely, yeah. I was like, do I compare myself more in different languages? Okay, got it.
I think that could be true, though, because I think especially when you think of a language that you're stronger in, then you're probably more likely to compare yourself to somebody else versus when you're starting off, you're thinking, okay, well, I'm new at this and I'm completely aware of that. But when you're good at a language that you've been studying for a long time, I think maybe it is easier to compare yourself to somebody else and think like, wow, even my strongest language is not as good as their level in this language.
That is really interesting. I lost my train of thought, but I was going to say, I think not only your level in the language, but also the amount of time you've been learning. Because I often find myself meeting someone who's only learned a language for like 2 or so years, and I've been learning for 5, and they're way more fluent than I am. And then I'm like, well, what did I do wrong? So I think also the amount of time can cause comparison. Like, well, they did it in 2 years. Why did it take me 5 years?
Right. And I found myself doing that too over time. And I think one thing that kind of helps is thinking, well, first of all, what are the other languages that they study? What is their background? Because if you're studying, well, if they're studying a Romance language and so are you, and they've learned it faster, maybe they've already studied other Romance languages and that's
Right.
why they're learning it faster.
Yeah. Or you might be slower because you have more languages on your plate. And
Exactly.
they might be solidly focusing on one for a long period of time. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we also need to kind of think, well, we don't know the full story of the other person, kind of like you were saying before and everything. And yeah, we shouldn't even kind of think about stuff like that. Like, oh, they've been learning for only 2 years, but I've been learning for 4. Everybody learns at a different rate. And
Absolutely.
maybe you haven't even found your language learning method yet that works for you.
That is true. Mm-hmm.
So then another thing that I had a question about, you kind of touched upon this a little bit, but kind of personal experiences of comparing yourself to other people. Now, you said that you've struggled with this before, and the way that you got out of it was kind of, I guess, through befriending these people.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that you would have done in that time too, or is befriending people mostly the way that you have gone about this?
I find that, so if you compare yourself to someone, you feel less worthy and you feel negative, right? But if you, regardless of what your initial thoughts were of a person, if you start complimenting them and encouraging them, even if you haven't befriended each other yet, you like giving someone a compliment makes you feel good too, right? So I found just with interacting with people on Instagram who have language learning accounts, just like, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart, not like fake what's the word, superficial comments saying like, oh yeah, you're doing great, but like honestly from the bottom of your heart saying, I'm so inspired by what you do, you're doing a great job, I love how you've done your notes, whatever. You feel so much better, and that feeling, it kind of starts to become addictive, like it overtakes the negativity. Why would you bring it upon yourself to constantly be in this negative mindset saying, oh, that person's so good, you know, I'm so jealous, when you could just compliment them? Yeah, they're good, but they worked for it. They didn't just wake up one day and became fluent. They put in the hours and the time, and you're probably jealous because you're not putting in the time. So what was I trying to get to? Like, just change that negativity into supporting them. Like, what I like to tell myself and other people is, one person's success is not your failure. If someone is fluent in Spanish and you're learning Spanish and you're not fluent, the fact that they are fluent does not make you a lesser person. You are two completely different people. It's not a life-death situation. It's not like you're competing for a career or something. You might be on opposite side of the world. So why would their success bring you down, right? So rather uplift them, because then you'll start feeling more positive about the whole thing.
Yes, and so something you said there just really kind of like struck me, which was you could have feelings, but don't let those feelings take over. So you may feel jealous, you may feel bad about yourself, you may feel these negative feelings, but your attitude or what you do with those feelings is what counts. So just turn it into something positive, and then maybe eventually those feelings will be replaced with something positive.
That is true. And sometimes it's hard, especially I think for girls. Girls tend to be a little, for lack of a better word, a little catty with each other. And I find that if you are envious of someone, you also start seeing them in a negative light. And when they mean something well, you interpret it negatively. So if you don't like someone, you already assume they don't like you. And there was this girl I met on Instagram like a few years ago, and I thought she didn't like me. And I was like, oh, you know, she has the same interests as me. You know, we're rivals, which is so not true. But I started thinking that she didn't like me either. So every time I saw her pictures, I was like, but now we are such good friends. And I'm like, this girl is the sweetest girl ever. She's so smart. Why didn't I befriend her earlier? So our first impressions can also be completely wrong.
That is so true. And that is such a great story. I'm so glad that you're sharing your personal experiences with all of us.
Yeah,
I think sometimes people think that people with a bigger presence on YouTube don't go through these things, which is simply not true. So I really appreciate that you're opening up like this to everybody to show them like everybody goes through this no matter who you are.
Yeah. And I don't think it makes you a bad person if you realize it and you work against it. It can only be beneficial. You're improving, you're becoming a better person. And now I know not to judge people from the start. And it's not a competition. We're not in a race.
Exactly. I agree with you completely on that. And going back to first impressions, it's even like when you eat something for the first time, you go to different restaurants and you try pizza and you think this pizza stinks. I don't like pizza. But then maybe the baker had a bad day or the cook had a bad day. And then you go back to that place, give it a second chance, and you realize, no, actually, it is good. So that's the same with people. You never know what kind of a day that they're having, or maybe even your mentality on the kind of day you're having when you meet this person too.
That's so true. That's a good metaphor.
Thanks.
I just have to go back and eat again.
I find a lot of the time I have like really random metaphors. Thank you.
Order another pizza.
So then my next question for you, you did talk about this a little bit with comparing yourself on YouTube. So as a creator, I guess you were talking about, once again, befriending those people on YouTube as well. But when it comes to kind of doubting yourself, when you kind of compare yourself to other people, if you start doubting yourself, like, am I making enough content? Am I having enough social media presence? Or like, what do I need to do to get better? How do you combat that side of things rather than just feeling maybe envious about the other person? What about when it comes to self-doubt because of comparison? How do you get through that?
Oh, how do I deal with feelings of inadequacy when I see what other people are doing? I have to make a very conscious mental decision to work against that. And it takes a lot of talking to myself. It's not just a feeling that goes away. I have to rationalize it to go away. So what I mean by that is I take a look again at what my goals are, why I do what I do, and why I enjoy it. And then I tell myself, well, for me, the most important thing in my life is, God, my family, my health, my happiness, my language learning, and then the stuff I put out. So if I am trying to focus so much on making content for people that I'm neglecting my faith, my friends, my family, my health, then it's not healthy at all. It's not why I want to do what I do. So I try and rationalize it by first looking at my priorities. Is writing this ebook and putting it out this month really going to help me be a better person? Yes, it might bring some extra income, it might educate some other people, but what am I giving up to get to that? If I am giving up spending time with my family, it's not worth it. So I think if you sort of refer to it as sort of the rush to put out content and other people are, really, they're growing and they're putting out content and I feel like I'm slow, I just learned to talk to myself and say, it's okay to be slow because you are originally doing this for yourself. It's not your full-time job. It would be a different story if my job was to be a full-time YouTuber or a full-time blogger, that my income would rely on that, But I have a full-time job and that should actually take priority before making content. So just thinking about it rationally helps me to feel less like, oh my gosh, I should be doing this and this and this, and look at that person writing their book, I should write a book. I'm just like, calm down, one thing at a time. Nobody is going to hate you if you don't write a book.
That is so true. I mean, if people heard our inner thoughts, they would probably say, like, no, I completely disagree with what you're saying about yourself. So a lot of the time, these are lies that come from ourselves.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so then my last, well, not quite last question. What about when other people unintentionally compare you to someone else? So say you get a comment on YouTube and they're like, wow, like, have you ever checked out this person's channel? Like, they're learning Korean too, and
Yeah.
you guys are like at the same level. Or maybe something like, you remind me of so and so. Or even if you're in class and a teacher starts talking about somebody else very highly in the classroom.
Right. That is such an interesting question. I do receive a lot of comments on my channel like, hey, do you know this polyglot YouTuber? They also do this and this. And most of the time I do know them, so I don't reply. I might check out their channel one more time. But I don't think I have a particularly positive or negative experience towards that. I honestly think I'm neutral. I think it's totally fine. I don't like if people promote themselves per se. But when you're recommending someone else, I think that's great. What did I want to say? But I think on the contrary, if I could just go on another tangent for a while. So, like I said, I feel neutral about that. But what I don't really like is when people look at me really highly in the sense of like, I'm super busy and I get so many messages and it's really, really difficult for me to reply to some people on Instagram, which I feel really bad about, but it's just the truth. And sometimes when I do reply, people are like, oh my goodness, you're my idol. I can't believe you replied. Screenshotted, guys, Lindie replied to me. And I'm like, I'm just a normal person. I really appreciate you doing that, but I'm not this amazing magical creature who speaks all the languages. I'm just normal, and I'm sorry it took me so long to reply to you. So I guess that just makes me feel a little like not human if people put me up on a pedestal. And I'm not saying this to sound humble, but it's really awkward for me. So when people look at me more highly than I am, because I'm just a human too, then that's a little strange for me. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. That is such a great illustration of that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I guess like how do you handle that kind of stuff? That's very interesting. So
Yeah.
then my last question is, so we've talked about kind of what to do when you're already comparing yourself to somebody else or someone even compares you to somebody else. But
Yeah.
how about before all of that happens? What is the best way that people can avoid comparing themselves to other people?
I don't think I'm going to give you the answer you want because I honestly think comparison is such a natural part of who we are. It's in our human nature. I think it's because we strive to grow. It's in our nature to want to grow. And when we see someone doing something very well, we want to be there because we want to grow. So I think you cannot stop yourself from comparing at all. You will always compare yourself in everything. The key is to not turn that into negativity and rather let it be a motivational factor and also a driving factor to befriend the person and get to know them more to see that they're also only human. What do you
Yeah,
do
I
you
agree.
do you have a way to, stop yourself from comparing?
I think for me, it's kind of the same thing that you're saying, but maybe for me, it would be something more. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to do with languages or YouTube specifically, but maybe going on social media less, kind of being self aware and knowing
Absolutely.
what sets off comparison for me. And so for me personally, it could be social media. So it may mean going on Facebook less or going on Twitter less, or if I go on, not looking through my news feed as much. If I want to post something, just post it, or if I want to answer a message, just answer it and then get out. But it may mean something like limiting my time on that.
That is
So,
such a good idea. That is so true because I think a lot of the comparison does stem from social media and seeing what people are doing. I think a healthy dose of that is necessary to have it act as motivation. But if you want to reach their level so badly, you should actually be putting in the time studying and learning that language and communicating with native speakers rather than wasting your time scrolling and comparing. So I think a better management of our time is very necessary as well.
Yeah, I'd agree completely. And you're not going to get better just wishing that you're somebody else. You'll only get
Right.
better by doing the thing and practicing and getting out there and living your life.
Absolutely. And you'll feel better about yourself if you are setting your own goals and reaching them rather than trying to get to what another person is doing.
Now, my final question for real this time is, do you have any final comments or thoughts on the topic, things we haven't covered yet, or things that maybe you wanted to say before but forgot about until now?
I think I just want to reiterate that everyone, pretty much everyone you meet is really friendly. And by that I mean when we are envious of somebody, when we compare, we see that person as being negative. We're projecting our emotions onto them. And I think if we just took the approach that this person, like, it's so great they're sharing the same interests as me, let's be friends. If we can take that approach instead of saying, wow, that person is doing so good, I wish I was them. If we would just change our minds, change our mindset, and we would in turn be friendlier to people, I think it would be a lot better. I don't know. Do you think like comparison and friendliness? If I don't know if I'm making sense right now. Do you think those two relate? Like, would you say comparison necessarily results in negativity?
I had the same thoughts as you when I was coming up with these questions. I thought maybe not comparison in itself could be a good thing, but definitely if you're looking at other people, they can inspire and motivate you. So if you say like, oh, they have a great level, then maybe you could see like, I could do that too. And that's a good thing. But when it comes to the other stuff, I do think it could be negative. I think it might be like a lot of different things in life. I've heard, for instance, with Facebook, I know I keep bringing up social media, but it's very relevant. But anyway, so I've heard that with Facebook, for instance, Facebook was just created to be Facebook. It's not good or bad. It's what you make of it. And I think that with comparison, a lot of people just kind of give it a bad rap because they think like, oh, that's only negative. Nothing positive can come out of it. And maybe it's not comparison per se that could create that motivation for you. Maybe it's something else, but definitely looking at other people for inspiration and admiring them without thinking too much about yourself. And I guess like wishing that you were them and everything, I think it could be a good thing. So I think that, yeah, it does breed like negativity, but depending on your mindset.
Right. And I think we can take the same thinking and apply it to if you think of someone whose personality you really like, if someone is very giving and open and warm, you don't think of them as like, that person is so warm. I want to be like them. They don't deserve to be happy because they're warm. But you actually think, how can I be that warm? Like, that is such a nice, like, trait to have. Let me try and be like that. So you're emulating that person without bringing them down and without thinking of them negatively. So we can take that same mindset and apply it to people we look up to in language learning. Not wish for them to fail their next language test, but say, like, look at their work ethic or look at the way they do this. I want to try and do that. Not I want to be that person or I want to see their fail, but I want to try and apply what they are doing.
Exactly. And a lot of the time, those same people, especially if they're on YouTube, they go, well, I did it, so can you. Now, really listen to them when they say that because they are telling the truth. Like, if they learned a language, they're just a person like everybody else. We're just people. So can you.
Exactly. And everyone is so different. If you look at like painters, artists, not one single artist has exactly the same style as another one. They might be similar, but you can see that in language learning methods as well. So if someone learns a lot faster than you, it's just because they have a different method. And we shouldn't all try to be the same person.
Right. That just never works out for anybody when they
No.
try to be the same person.
Yeah.
So do you have any like final thoughts or is this about it for you, like everything we talked about?
Yeah, I just see that we have one comment from Alex Nosekai, which says, I really like both of your channels. What you're discussing is so relatable. So I just want to give a little shout out to Alex and say thanks for joining. And I want to agree with him and say that I think Angela's channel is one of the most relatable, honest YouTube channels out there. I always say this too, but it's so true. You are such an honest person. I find that a ton of YouTubers try and pretend to be something they're not, or they hide parts of themselves. But you are so honest, and you talk about these negative things and the struggles of language learning. You're not necessarily like, look what I speak. You're like, look what I'm struggling with. Let's struggle together. And I think that's really pure and honest, and it's a beautiful thing. So I just want to say I love your channel.
Oh, thank you so much. That is seriously super encouraging coming from you. And like, I don't want to do the whole thing of like, oh my gosh, you're my idol, you're amazing, you're a superhero. But you are very inspiring to a lot of people. And you have been very inspiring to me and have shown me that I can do this too. And I'm just super, super thankful that you could join me today, especially coming right after work and being able to talk about such a heavy topic like this. So thankful. I really wanted you for this episode.
Thanks. I really appreciate you having me on my show. Sorry if I was 2 minutes late. You know the traffic here. But yeah, I had a great time talking to you as usual, and I'd love to chat to you again.
Yes, definitely. I had such a fun time, and I know that I learned a lot from our conversation together.
Me too. I like the way you look at things. I'm going to rewatch this and take some notes.
I am too, to be honest. There was so much in here. So thank you so, so much.
Thanks. I had a great time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. It's like nighttime. The sun is setting already here.
Oh, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
And you're able to relax after a hard day of work and then this thing.
Merci beaucoup.
De rien.
See you again sometime.
See you. Bye. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Bye.